Ahoy, this is Michaela from Team Retro, where we like retro games and we like the devices that bring them to us. So as far as PC handheld gaming goes, I absolutely adore my Steam Deck. And I thought the Win600 was an okay PC gaming device, but I did ultimately end up selling it because I wanted to pick up something a little bit beefier and a little bit more feature-rich. So I ended up settling on the Aya Neo Air, which is a device that has since been succeeded by two other Aya Neo handhelds, the Aya Neo 2 and the Aya Neo Geek, but those devices are a little bit bulkier and are a little bit closer to the Steam Deck. So I wanted something lighter for travel, and I wanted something that could run some PC games without trouble, namely Final Fantasy XIV, as well as a few retro games that I do have on Steam. So we're going to go as in-depth as possible as we can with this device, and we're going to try to figure out if this is a worthwhile purchase at the beginning of 2023. We're going to see if this thing is worth the price tag, and we're going to do some game testing with subscriber requests. So let's dive in and let's get to work. Alright, let's hop on our mount and ride it into Spectown here. This unit is rocking an AMD Ryzen 5 5600U CPU with a Ryzen Zen 3 iGPU. We can get this unit in 8 to 16 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM at 4266 megahertz. The model I'm using has 16 gigabytes of RAM. We have an M.2 2280 SSD, and that's available in either 256 or 512 gigabytes. I have the 512 gigabyte model. There's a 7,000 milliamp hour battery, and we do get Wi-Fi 6 in this model, which would make it great for streaming. This device also rocks Bluetooth 5.2, has two USB-C ports, and a micro SD card slot to expand storage. So overall, these are some pretty beefy specs coming in such a small package. In addition, you have a fingerprint sensor on the top for easy login, and this device comes with Windows 11. Here's a look at the top of the device. There's the fingerprint sensor, the volume up and down button, and the triggers and shoulder buttons, which to me are okay. The bumpers are alright, but the triggers are a little bit too loose for my liking. On the bottom, you have a micro SD card slot. You have that second USB-C port, as well as a headphone jack and speakers. I would say that the build quality on this is really solid, considering that these are not that cheap. Here at the front of the device, you have a 5.5-inch OLED screen, as well as your Hall sensor joysticks and face buttons. You have Start and Select on the left, as well as a dedicated Aya space button and a Show desktop button. You also have two LED lights surrounding the joysticks. We'll get into that in a little bit. But first, let's compare this device to some other retro handhelds that are out there. So let's start with the Odin Pro, and ergonomic-wise, this is a very close device to the Aya Neo Air. The only difference being is that the Odin runs Android as opposed to the Windows operating system of the Aya Neo Air. But ergonomically, these devices are very similar. They're both great to hold in the hand. The Odin does have a bigger screen, but the Aya Neo Air has that OLED panel, and you will get very good colors out of it. The Odin also has buttons on the back, which are great for Android shortcuts in standalone emulators. Moving on to the Anbernic RG552. So what you have here is a smaller device with a similar size screen that also has a resolution that is better for retro gaming in general. Your 16 and 8-bit games will look great in the 552. However, the ergonomics are just not as good as the Ayaneo Air. Now let's address the elephant in the room, the Anbernic Win 600, which is a heavier, bulkier device with far less power to it. Now I shot this footage before selling my device, and while the Ayaneo Air is a little bit more expensive, it's also a lot sleeker and capable of a lot more than the Win 600 is. As a matter of fact, as much as I love the Win 600, over time I just found it harder and harder to use for what I wanted out of a Windows handheld. Making its debut for the first time on this channel is Scaly. This is the postal scale that I bought to measure the size of my various retro handhelds, and in a very poor cheap display, this device will tell us in grams exactly how much one of these devices weighs. So let's start by taking a look at the Ayaneo Air, which comes in at about 398 grams. So let's compare this to some other similarly sized handhelds like the Odin Pro, and this measures in at about 376 grams. Now let's take a look at the Retroid Pocket 3, which is about 240 grams. The Anbernic RG552 comes in at 368 grams. The Logitech G Cloud comes in at 462 grams. The Evercade EXP comes in at about 284 grams. The Anbernic RG353V comes in at about 190 grams. And finally, a Jigglypuff as seen from above comes in at 50 grams. Everyone give a big shout out to Scaly for its debut performance. So based on this weight comparison, I would say that the Ayaneo Air is definitely a lightweight to a mid-tier handheld. It's not going to be as heavy as a Steam Deck, but it's not going to be as light as a smaller handheld like an Anbernic device or something like the Evercade. Starting the device up for the first time, you're going to get your typical Windows 11 interface, where you're going to select your language and proceed with the install like you would a Windows computer. Now, because this is Windows 11, it is going to require you to be connected to the internet and sign in with a Microsoft account. And for a device like this, I don't like to use my personal Microsoft account. So I'm going to show you how you can actually bypass this in Windows 11. And that's when you get to the sign-in part. We're just going to go ahead and type a@a.com. And then go ahead and click next, and then you could type anything in for your password. You have to put something in, because if you try to leave it blank and click sign in, it's going to tell you that you have to enter in a password. So put in anything you want. I'm just going to put test in here, and then you're going to get the screen that says oops, something went wrong, and it's going to go ahead and let you use a local account. Now, one great feature about this handheld is the fingerprint sensor built into the sleep, wake, and power button, and you can set this up very similarly to how you would set up Touch ID on an iPhone. However, this is a little bit more finicky than an iPhone, so I've noticed that I have had to try my fingerprint multiple times before it would be recognized. So what sets the Ayaneo Air apart from something like the Win 600 is its built-in iSpace app, which is designed to be a way to control various aspects of the device on the fly, such as brightness, volume, as well as resolution, fan speed, and TDP. And so by pressing the Ioneo button on the right, you can automatically bring up this quick tool or bring up the software and be able to adjust these settings in a game to get your best battery life possible. The iSpace app also serves as a hub for your installed games and links directly to your Steam account. So you could see here, I have all of my Steam games just right there in the menu, and I can launch these games right from within the iSpace menu. So all I need to do is click play, and it will launch the Steam client, and it will bounce right into a game like Horizon Chase Turbo, and I could start playing pretty quick. And I'm going to use a bright game like Horizon Chase Turbo here, just to kind of show off this OLED screen as best as I can, because I don't know how good it's going to come across in camera, but this really is a beautiful display. Now, the further you dive into the settings here, the more you realize just how buggy and oddly put together this software actually is. You do see some like misspellings and bad grammar, but you can go into the assistant and you can change the color and the effect of the RGB lighting around the joysticks. You can also remap all of the buttons, especially the two shortcut buttons on the top and the show desktop button on the front. And if you so choose, you can have the LEDs do some pretty cool things, like there's this breathe Google effect, and if I go ahead and apply this here, you're going to notice the lights around the joysticks are now going to breathe on and off, but they're going to have this kind of really cool rainbow effect. So it is really neat that you can have some of these cool customizations while you are playing your games. Now let's get into the meat and bones and get into some game testing. And I can do entire videos just on how to run certain PC games and the optimal settings in which to run them to get your best performance for battery life. But for this video, we did a couple of viewer of requests as well as some of my personal favorites. So we're going to start here with Final Fantasy XIV, which I ran in normal laptop mode, which is the lowest possible settings at 1080p. And at a 10 watt TDP, I was able to get a good 2 hours and still have about 18% battery left. And even capped at 30 FPS, this game still ran pretty well on this device. Now, Sonic Origins is a weird one because you would think, being a collection of some of the old Genesis games, that you would be able to tone down the TDP. Unfortunately, I found that if I went anywhere below a 10 watt TDP, the gameplay itself would be fine, but the menus would be really laggy and hard to navigate. So I balance it out at 10 watt TDP and I turned VSync off in game settings, and I found that that gave me the best settings in order to play this game. However, the battery did die after 90 minutes, and I did not get a full 2-hour play session out of Sonic Origins. Now that said, if you don't take battery life into account, this device is powerful, but you're going to find yourself plugged in quite often while using it. Moving on to some emulation, we're going to try Yoshi's Woolly World, which is a Wii U game. So we're using the CMU standalone emulator at 1080p, and unfortunately I had to kick this up to a 12 watt TDP because when it comes to emulation with high-end systems like this, you do have to deal with post-processing and shader processing, which can sometimes hang up or freeze up the gameplay. However, this did run pretty well and was playable, but the battery did die after only 90 minutes of gameplay. Now, to take a page out of a fellow YouTube content creator, the Retro Tech Dad's book, I picked this game because it is a game that has not been re-released outside of the Wii U and 3DS, so the only way to play this game is to either have a Wii U or emulate it just like we are here. And if you haven't checked out Retro Tech Dad's channel yet, I highly recommend you go and do so. He's got some great content going on over there. Now, Adam from the podcast Revival and Extinction and part of the Steam Machine community requested that I play the 2018 God of War game, and unfortunately I couldn't get a Steam code for that game just yet. So I will feature that in a future video, but for now I figured I would do the obligatory God of War test using PPSSPP, so we have Ghost of Sparta here. And I have to admit, this device is kind of a beast for PSP gaming, because not only do you have the ability to emulate most PSP games, including the God of War titles, but you have a 16:9 aspect ratio on a beautiful OLED display, so you can kick this up to about a 3x resolution for God of War, and a 4x resolution for other easier to emulate titles. Now, unfortunately for God of War, I did have to kick this up to a 12 watt TDP for it to keep up, and the battery died within 90 minutes, but the game ran beautifully. The only other downside to PSP emulation is I was not able to map an external controller, so I was only really able to either play this game in handheld mode, or I had to hold the Aya Neo itself and use it as a controller when it was connected to my monitor. That might be something that could be fixed, and if you know how to fix that, please let me know in the comments below. But it was an unfortunate downside that I had to play in handheld mode in order to play PSP games, which I guess is okay considering that that's how they were meant to be played anyway. And nothing makes this device shine brighter than a nice, bright 16-bit colorful game, because something like Super Mario World just looks absolutely gorgeous on this OLED display. And on top of that, I was able to use RetroArch to apply a normal 4x filter, which really enhances and cleans up those pixels, so you get some amazing detail here. And on top of it, because it's such a low-powered game, I was able to move the fan down into saver mode and drop this down to a 5-watt TDP. And after a 2-hour play session, I still had 39% battery. So the further back you go onto a game catalog, the better results you're going to get as far as preserving battery life. And by the request of Dalton from the Steam Machine podcast, as well as the amazing gentleman who was kind enough to let me use his music here on this channel, we went with Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, which we played at full screen at default settings with a 10-watt TDP, and we did get a 2-hour play session out of this game and still had about 5% battery to spare, which isn't much, but you were able to get the full 2 hours out of this before having to plug in or charge.
Good afternoon.
What is it now?
What's new with you?
I saw some mud fires by the water recently. I steered clear of them.
Can't stand the sight of those places.
Greetings to you.
Don't the Varys brothers run a good shop?
I've shot their masters. All visitors to the Imperial Palace are asked to keep their voices down, especially in this pleasing session.
How are you?
Great.
Have you heard any word about the other provinces?
Nothing I'd like to talk about.
Alright, let's dive into some commendations and condemnations with the Ioneo Air. And there is quite a lot to say when it comes to both good and bad things about this device. So let's start with the good, the commendations. This is a very ergonomically comfortable device to hold, and for both retro gaming as well as modern gaming alike, you're going to have a good time as far as holding the device. And you're going to have a good time seeing your content on that beautiful OLED screen. I do enjoy the iSpace app, allowing you to adjust TDP on the fly depending on what game you're playing in order to best preserve your battery life as much as you can. And I do like that they put Hall sensor joysticks in this device, because that means that you're not going to have any issues with drift. Now, this next commendation is personal preference, but I do like that it actually plays Final Fantasy XIV very well. You have the combination of the power of the device as well as the built-in Wi-Fi 6, so you won't have any connection issues. And this is what won this device for me over the Win600, because the Win600 could not play MMOs very well. And considering that if this device can play a powerful MMO like Final Fantasy XIV, it'll probably handle your game streaming just as well. And we are going to test game streaming in a future video. And the flexibility of Windows 11 does make this a versatile device. So you can run the Steam store, you can run the GOG store, you can run the Epic store, and you can also put whatever Windows programs that you may need. So you can watch videos on this, you can stream Netflix, and you can connect this to a monitor along with a mouse and keyboard, and you could just use it as a regular computer. Alright, so let's get into some of the condemnations, things that I did have issues with this device, and we're going to start with the fact that the iSpace app is very buggy. It does what it needs to do, but then there's also issues when updating the controller's firmware, as well as it sometimes can freeze up and does have a couple of errors in it that just need to be fixed, and that will hopefully come over time. So let's now talk about the battery life, because as you saw in testing, you're going to get at max 2 hours out of this device, and that's not because of the beefiness of the battery, it's because of the high processing power that this device needs, and depending on what you're doing with it, you're going to be drawing more power from the battery and from the CPU and GPU, and you're just not going to get a whole lot of battery life. Plus, you're powering that OLED screen on top of it. And when we take into account something like the Steam Deck, which is about $150 cheaper at the base model than this device is at $549 starting price, then you're going to start to wonder if maybe it's just better to get a Steam Deck. Yes, this is a chunkier device, and the Aya Neo Air is meant to be sleek and portable, so they do have different purposes for different people, but when you consider price to performance, that is something that you need to keep in mind. Also, with Windows 11, you do get a lot of flexibility, but you also get the problems that come with Windows 11, including having to run Windows Update, as well as having to have a virus protection on the device, such as Bitdefender. And then the final condemnation is that while this device is a great handheld, the best performance comes when you actually have it docked to a monitor. And that's mostly how I've been using this device. It's something that I could throw in my book bag. It doesn't weigh a lot. It doesn't take up a lot of space. And then I can hook it up to a monitor, and I have basically a Windows desktop that can do a lot of things that Windows desktops can do, including gaming. And then you don't have to take those TDP issues into concern. You could just turn it up to a 12-watt TDP and you could just game away. Now, I put that under condemnations because this is a handheld and you probably want to play it as a handheld. So getting the best out of a device like this only when you're docked is actually a negative rather than a positive. And so while there are a lot of positives to this device, and there are a lot of great ways in which you can use it for PC as well as retro gaming through emulation, there are a lot of factors you are going to have to consider, price being one of them and performance being the other. And if you want a beautiful handheld screen, or you want a tiny laptop that you can just kind of carry around and hook up to an external monitor, or use when it's mostly plugged in with a mouse and keyboard, then yeah, I would say this device is for you. However, if you are not looking specifically for anything with an OLED screen, or you want to try to get a little bit more battery life, or you're not interested in PC gaming, well, there are definitely cheaper options out there, and the Aya Neo devices do tend to run on the more expensive side. Now, me personally, I actually do adore this device, but I don't use it as a Steam Deck replacement as much as you would think. I use it more as a travel handheld, so if I want to play for just a little bit while I'm on the go, or if I want to hook this up at work, if I have a couple of minutes during my lunch break, I can definitely do that because it doesn't take up as much space or as much weight in a book bag or a briefcase. Now that said, I do like this device a lot, and I do plan to feature more content on it in the future, so let me know what you want to see playing on this device in the comments below, and let me know if you have one of these devices and what you like and don't like about it, or what you specifically use it for. But that'll do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and please feel free to continue the conversation in the Steam Machine Discord. Link is in the video description. And if this video was helpful to you in any way, please be sure to like and subscribe. Until next time, bye for now, and don't stop believing.